Will deficits be larger? Yes, deficits will be larger. Will that lead to greater financing needs from the government? For sure. It'll also lead to stronger growth. That on the surface should combine to put an upward pressure on long term interest rates. Now, I think the question is how big a pressure will that be on long term interest rates? And in particular, will that pressure be large enough to create a monetary tightening that offsets the positive fiscal impulse, as well as the monetary easing that we're seeing on the front end? And there, my guess is that the beta to those increased deficits and issuance is probably going to be lower than many folks who doom about the long term U.S. bond
Yeah.
market
Yeah.
will suggest. And the reason why that is a couple fold. One, just remember the U.S. economy is the strongest economy in the world, in the developed world, and has the highest interest rates on the long end, and actually is getting a lot of demand from elsewhere in the developed world for higher yielding U.S. debt. And if U.S. debts rise, that will likely incentivize more demand, not less demand. That's number one. Number two is if we get into a situation where yields are rising to the point where they start dragging on the stock market, it's important to remember the Treasury has the authority and the flexibility to cut duration supply.
Yeah.
And while members of the Trump administration or members of, say, Trump affiliates have been quite negative about the efforts that Janet Yellen did to constrain duration supply over the course of the last couple of years, once you're sitting in office and you see those rates rise and it's starting to hit the stock market, that moral outrage that we're seeing as expressed as they sit on the outside may become, a policy norm. Particularly, I mean, like, look, it's a politicized seat
Hmm.
in a highly political administration. And so my guess is if interest rates rise, they'll just cut the duration supply. And then the only real constraint is whether the dollar, starts to fall. That in the context of, the US being the outperformer, it's just probably not a big risk. In certainly in the medium term, maybe eventually to be a risk, but not in the medium term.